So up next, we'll have Sultan Mahmoud from Aix-Marseille, and he'll talk about judicial independence, religion, and politics, and discuss some theory and evidence.
Thanks everybody, for the invite, and thanks for the great, very fascinating presentation. It's really great to have you all here and have you present and your very interesting papers. So this is joint work with Evner, who's my longtime co-author. It's entitled Religious Leaders and Rule of Law. So I'll just get right to it because we only have 20 minutes. So the motivation for this paper is rooted in history, where history is full of instances where religious leaders shaped the trajectories of nations and societies. Just to consider two examples, one from the West, Pope Urban II, his famous sermon at the Council of Clermont in France, where he advocated the Crusades, is believed to have profound influence on society at large following that. If we go to the East, we have Imam al-Ghazali from 12th century Persia, who gave his famous fatwa against science and rationality, which is also believed to have profound influence on development of many Muslim societies. And now, of course, we have from Enlightenment onwards, at least, that scholars believe that religious leaders deeply influence institutions, especially Spinoza, of course. And more recently, scholars, especially the ones here in the audience as well, have begun to disentangle how exactly do religious authorities impact institutions, politics, and economic development. Now, in this paper, despite these efforts, we think that there is lack of causal evidence on how religious leaders influence institutions, and in particular, how do religious leaders impact rule of law. So to answer this question, we have to take a step back and ask another question. That is, how do historical religious institutions from which religious leaders are associated with impact rule of law, and whether the effect of these historical religious institutions is explained by the rise of religious leaders to political office. To give you the context, what I'm talking about, I want to show you one picture. This is the Bahauddin Zakriya Shrine in the city of Multan in Pakistan. This shrine was built in the 12th century and is a tomb dedicated to a Sufi saint. And this shrine, like all other shrines in Pakistan, are associated with the religious leader associated with this shrine. The religious leader associated with the Bahauddin Zakriya Shrine is Shah Mahmud Qureshi, pictured in white here. Shah Mahmud Qureshi, like his father before him, and his father before him, and his grandfather before him, is a shrine leader associated with this shrine. Shah Mahmud Qureshi is believed, like other dynastic shrine leaders, are believed to be the direct descendant of Prophet Muhammad of Islam. And their sacred blood, many locals believe, allow them to wield supernatural powers, which is a bit like saint worship in the Christendom, where people believe that they can heal the sick and solve all their problems. And this is just one picture of a child getting blessings from the shrine leader. Now, in addition to the shrine leader, after a particular shock, which I will talk about, this shrine leader rose to politics and he became the mayor of Multan. And here he is pictured, the same shrine leader campaigning for the mayorship of Multan. And now we see after that he is now the current foreign minister of Pakistan, pictured here with President Trump and Prime Minister Imran Khan, the current Prime Minister of Pakistan. So what is going on? What explains the rise of the shrine leader to politics, and how does it influence institutions and in particular rule of law? To give this, I want to present you the main story of our paper and how we conceive political equilibrium in Pakistan. So we conceive the political equilibrium of Pakistan as follows. Throughout Pakistan's political history, local politics is dominated by large land-owning feudal politicians that alternate power at the local level and at the state level. However, in 1999, Pakistan transitioned from a hybrid democracy to a direct military dictatorship. And this greatly disrupted the balance of power of these traditional feudal elites. What the military government did is that it introduced a local government reform, which weakened these relatively secular traditional elite and ushered the rise of this new breed of politicians, these dynastic shrine leaders, which I showed. The shrine leaders, also called the Sajada Nashins, or literally bearers of the holy turban, derive their legitimacy not from the wealth and land ownership they get, but from religion. And what we say is that these religious leaders, which enjoy higher legitimacy, face lower electoral costs of deteriorating rule of law than secular politicians, and they are able to influence the courts in particular much more than a secular leader does. To give you a brief summary of our main empirical results, what we find is that districts that have high historical shrine density, those districts have now more pro-government rulings and lower quality judicial decisions. And this, we show, is entirely explained by the rise of shrine leaders to political power. Our identification comes from the timing of the 1999 military coup that brings these shrine leaders to political office. What we do is we are comparing rule of law outcomes before and after the 1999 military coup across Pakistani districts with predetermined historical shrine density. We show that shrine leaders are able to use the courts more to expropriate land from the society, and they are able to use the courts to expropriate additional land. And our estimates show that the shrine leaders expropriate about 0.06% of GDP, or 180 million US dollars of additional land relative to the feudal elites. This is substantial amount, and this 180 million is about the same it is equivalent to the federal budget for education, which was earmarked in 2019. Coming to the related literature, I won't go too much into detail, but this paper speaks to the three main strands of literature. It speaks to the literature on what are the conditions for establishment of rule of law in society. It also speaks to the vibrant and recent, still evolving literature, which many of the people here have really contributed towards, on the political economy of religion, which has shown the primacy of religion in shaping both institutions, politics, and economic development. Last but not the least, this paper also speaks to the literature on the deep roots literature, where which just tries to assess the long-term consequences of culture and institutions. Now, we contribute to this literature in four ways. We document that, like development outcomes and other outcomes, rule of law also has deep roots, and it is rooted in historical religious institutions. And the influence of these religious institutions persists and is explained by religious leaders associated with these institutions and religious leaders rising to political power. Finally, we also think that we contribute to the literature by focusing on a country where studies are lacking, where data is incredibly scarce, and also in a context, it's the second largest Muslim majority country in the world, Pakistan, and the fifth most populous country. And it is a context where democratic institutions have not really taken root. So our data is from several sources. And one of the key challenges of writing a paper like this is, of course, the data collection effort which goes with it. And our primary data source is the texts of the judgment orders. These are decisions written down by judges in the local courts of Pakistan, which we use to construct our outcome variables on decision quality and decision in favor of the state. We combine this with other data from British colonial gazettes of 1911, which lists the number of shrines across Pakistan, and we collect some additional information from other databases like Election Commission of Pakistan, where we get data where we identify whether a shrine leader won political office and non-shrine leader won political office by looking at the honorific title of Makhdoom in the election database. And finally, we get district level characteristics from census records, agriculture census and population census, which we digitize as well. So the key question is, how do we measure rule of law? We have several outcomes, but the key outcome variable is state victories. Here we focus on all cases where the citizen is poised against the state. And our key outcome variable here is state wins, which takes the value of 1 if the government obtains a victory and 0 if the citizen obtains a victory. Now, state wins is measured in 2 ways. First, we ask a law firm to code the state victory variable as 1 and state losses as 0 after reading the text of the judgment order. Now, since this may be subjective, we also do a textual analysis of the cases where we analyze the text of the judgment order and cross-check the results by looking for marker petition against the state is dismissed in the text of the judgment order, in which case state victory variable takes the value of 1. And if the text of the judgment order contains the marker petition against the state is accepted, the state victory variable takes the value of 0, and we get identical results if we use either of them. We also have additional variables which we think are strongly approximates rule of law, but I won't have time to go into those details. So we have a simple difference and differences estimation, where on the left-hand side, we have state victories at the case level. On the right-hand side, we have the interaction term between a post-coup dummy interacted with historical shrine density as recorded in the 1911 British colonial archive gazettes. And we had district fixed effects, time fixed effects, even case type fixed effects, and a bunch of control variables. Now, kappa is our difference and we cluster standard errors at the district level. Now, kappa is the difference and differences estimator for the impact of shrine density on state victories. For us to causally interpret kappa, you need some identifying assumptions which you have to satisfy, which is for any difference and differences estimation. Now, we cannot, so one of course is the parallel trends assumption, which we cannot directly test, but we can show is that areas where there are no shrines and areas where there are shrines, they seem to follow a common trend, at least before the military coup. So after the military coup, you might have a good approximation as well. The second key assumption, identifying assumption for any difference and differences, is that there are no confounding interactions which are correlated both with the military coup and shrine density. Here we do a couple of tests, but I'm going to only show you one of them, where we show that other things which could have changed do not seem to change if we look at the data. For example, we see that in high shrine density areas, before and after the coup, similar types of cases are filed, similar types of cases are decided, implying that at least the cases are similar before and after the coup in high and low shrine density areas. So now we can come with a bit more confidence and interpret our kappa with slight more confidence after having a look at this evidence in favor of the identification assumption. And when we estimate our difference and differences estimated, yes? So when we estimate kappa, we find that a standard deviation increase in shrine density increases state wins by about 5 percentage points following the coup. So this is substantial. So this is about 10% increase over the sample mean, because the mean of dependent variable is about 50%. Now coming to the mechanism, what does it mean that historical high shrine density, historical religious institutions affect state victories? Is the effect of historical shrine density explained by the rise of religious leaders to political power? And And what we show is, so before we do a more rigorous test, just a simple plot seems to be suggestive. So if we just look at number of shrine leaders elected to office before and after the coup, there seems to be a huge jump after the 1999 military coup. Here, we use the honorific titles of shrine leaders and match them in the election database to see how many of the shrine leaders won elections relative to not before and after the coup. And we see there is a dramatic jump in the number of shrine elites elected. In addition, what we do is, so we can do a more rigorous test through a triple difference specification where we interact our shrine density and post-coup variable with number of shrine elites elected to office in a district in a given time. And what we find that the effect is entirely explained. The effect of historical shrine density is entirely explained by rise of religious leaders to political office. For example, we don't see that the shrine density per se has an effect. So if the area is high shrine density and no shrine leader has won elected office, local courts in that district show no rise in pro-government rulings. However, we do see a pro-government ruling only where shrine leaders won elections. Also, we see that just shrine leaders winning after the coup is also not important as well. So quantitatively, what we estimate is that when a 1 standard deviation increase in shrine density occurs, state wins increases by 1 percentage point when 4 more shrine leaders win elections in the district. Now, I won't go more into detail of the mechanisms, but yeah, if you'll have questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them. So in conclusion, what I have shown is that districts which have higher shrine density have higher government victories. In fact, we have other variables. We also find that districts that have higher shrine density also have lower quality judicial decision as measured by case delay, rulings on evidence, and also whether the adequate legal process was followed as well. And we present evidence that these results are entirely explained by the rise of shrine leaders to political office. Finally, I didn't have time to go into the details of the types of cases driving the results, but what we show is that the key type of cases driving the results are land expropriation cases. And we find that additional land expropriation that occurs by religious leaders is about $180 million every year. So I would just conclude with a historian's comment on the shrine leaders and their land expropriation, where he writes that they came with religion but no land and left with land but no religion. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Sultan. You have a question already in the Q&A, which is great. The question is, how do you think about the period of Zia's rule from 1977 to 88, which might be argued involved a large degree of Islamization of politics and society? I was curious, why do you highlight 1999 as being a crucial break? How does the period from 77 to 88 play a role in affecting the status of these shrine leaders? And why weren't shrine leaders important in elections between 88 and 1999?
So this is a great question. And the quick answer is shrine leaders were important then as well. So how we conceive the equilibrium. So we have data so we consider that and actually this is also a historical fact, that in each of the 3 main military coups of Pakistan's history, every time the military ruler introduced a local government reform, which brought to power shrine leaders specially. So Zia's military coup also brought shrine leaders. There is also a book written on it by K.K. Aziz, Pakistani historian, which also argues that shrine leaders were very prominent also during Zia's regime as well. So this is how we think of a military political equilibrium, that every time the military comes in, to legitimize is to basically free ride on the legitimacy of the shrine leaders it 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 brings them to the dinner table of politics, and then you have a higher degree of shrine leaders in the system, and then when another military coup comes, then there is even a higher level of equilibrium. This is how I conceive the political equilibrium in Pakistan.
Anybody else from the audience? Yeah, we have a question in the chat. What determines the shrine locations?
So this is, in some sense, we think it's exogenous and also predetermined. So it depends when a Sufi saint died. Where the Sufi saint died determines the shrine, because it's a tomb of a Sufi saint. So this is one, so Sufi saints that died in the 12th to 13th century is one key determinant of shrine location. But I think I know where the question is getting at. Suppose the shrine are located, for example, near a river or commercial centers. So let's suppose that, although we present evidence, it's not the case. Even if it is, what we are arguing here is that we are comparing shrine density before and after the coup. So the disproportionate effect is unlikely to be important here.
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, my feeling about the question is also that it's just, you know, I personally find it nice to understand the history in addition to sort of the underlying, you know, the empirical evidence sort of consistent with exogeneity. It's nice to understand where they come from, just historically.
Very useful. Thanks.
Just another question that I guess it relates to this sort of discussion that you have about how the power of political elites sort of shifts each time there's one of these political transitions. You know, you would think that there's essentially sort of a new like political economy equilibrium, a new coalition. And so, you know, I wonder sort of, you know, have you thought about sort of documenting other margins of change? So, you know, is this it sort of, is this the main quid pro quo in a sense? Or are there other changes? And then sort of thinking about also other margins of responses. So, you know, one thing, and this relates a little bit to where the shrines are located, and how the previous sort of political shocks might have mattered. But you could easily imagine like migration responses. So each time religious elites sort of become more powerful following a political transition, is it the case that you know, secular people leave, or people who feel oppressed by this sort of you know, exploitation leave? And so, you know, is there some dynamic process that's changing? Just more generally, like I think you isolate this you know, particular element of the new equilibrium, but are there others that you've thought about and documented?
I think this is a really great question. So we don't have direct migration data across Pakistani districts, but we did check population density. We didn't think of it in terms of population density in a district, and that is uncorrelated with the shrine density before and after the coup. We thought of population density as a measure of urbanization, but not really migration, but one can think of it in migration as well. So one is this, but I think what I can show you very quickly is, which I think really also speaks to your question, is that how do religious leaders influence courts, which is a bit interesting. And I think here economic historians especially, and historians as well in Pakistan, have tried to understand this thing, that how are these shrine leaders influencing politics and institutions. And there are two broad views. One is, of course, that religious leaders are like all other political elites, like you also alluded to, and they exert their influence on the court just because they make a larger coalition. They are large landowners, they can have this influence. Or is it the case, how the second view, which is by Jared Rubin and Jean-Philippe Plateau, which argue that actually religious leaders are special in some sense, they have high legitimacy to rule, and this allows them to get away more by influencing institutions than a secular leader can. So one simple way to put it is a religious leader can always say it's God's will, which a secular leader cannot easily go, even if he has this large landowning quality. So now this is very difficult to disentangle empirically, but we do at least show that we also have data on cotton barons of Pakistan. So these are large cotton owning politicians. So these are also wealthy in some sense. They also have large land. So if the view of Gilmartin and Aziz was correct, we should also see a similar effect when large landowners win elections. And what we find is actually, no, we don't see the similar kind of effect when these landowning politicians win elections. Now, this doesn't prove the mechanism, but what it does show is that maybe there is some truth to the legitimacy, that this legitimacy is this extra thing. So religious leaders also have this legitimacy, but religious leaders also have land ownerships and wealth, but they also have this extra legitimacy, which kind of gives them this additional push to influence this court, what we are looking at. So, yeah.
If anybody else has any other questions. So maybe I'll ask one more again about just thinking about this, what's happening after the coup. So, is your sense, so I can think of a couple different underlying stories to the empowerment of these religious elites. One is that the military coup kind of destabilizes the status quo and creates an opening for the religious elites to kind of reassert themselves. Another is that the military coup sort of involves sort of the active placement of these elites into positions of power. I mean, through political means, through transfers, and sort of the aid of the military elite who sponsored the coup and who are behind it. And so, is your sense that there is this sort of active collaboration between the military and these religious elites? And if so, do you see the areas with religious elites, deciding more cases in favor of the state, but do they also somehow manage to produce more popular support for the regime?
So this is very difficult to measure for the following reason, that in a developing country like Pakistan, there are these huge patronage networks. So basically this guy is paying that guy is paying that guy, and that guy is paying that. So it's not easy to really connect local government to like how it reaches the military government per se, which is at the federal level. However, one piece of historical account I can give you is, at least in general, even before General Zia, General Ayub's military coup basically had this local government system which brought shrine leaders to power, but then he directly asked shrine leaders to vote for him as well. So his local government system was a bit different from Musharraf and Zia's. So here in this context, but this is not this military coup, but in this context, there was this direct, and I think there was this learning by military leaders in Pakistan over time. And then they thought that they can get the same influence by not really being criticized and come directly to power. So yeah, ruling behind the scenes always they thought is more beneficial.
Okay, thanks so much, Sultan. Super interesting.
Yeah.